So I'm going to blatantly rip off a web page here, but I am going to quote my source. What I did was I did a Google search for MySQL injection examples. And this is a way to attack somebody's web page. And there's various things that you can do, but I think we can get the idea here pretty quickly. So suppose that you have a web page, and in your web page you have a little pop-up that asks a user to provide some kind of input. So maybe you ask them to put in your email, and then based on that input you run a query on your database. So select from something from some table where field equals, and this is the important part, you put in quotes the thing that they typed in, email, and you're looking to get some information back and match a person with their email address. So suppose that the person types in their email address like this, then things go fine. You look up that email address and you get back what you want. But suppose the person knows something about databases and types in this exactly, anything with a single quote here, or x equals x. So what happens when you put this inside this code, then this quote on the anything ends this quote, and what you end up doing is doing a search for where field equals anything, and then this or becomes x equals x, and so you end up returning the entire database, which, you know, maybe not so bad, but the idea is that a person that knows some MySQL can interject code into your query and cause some problems. So it gets worse. Well, let's see. You can insert code to drop people, and if it's bad enough and they're able to guess well enough, they can actually erase your entire database. So these kind of security issues are obviously pretty severe. They have happened and something that we worry about quite a bit. So having said all that, I am going to show you how I interfaced my web page with a database using some fairly modern MySQL techniques. Okay, so let's see. I want to look at this code. Okay, this is the code from my conf.php file, and this is what I'm going to include in the code for this web page. And this is the stuff that interfaces to the database. So this is included again in the index.html, which we will see. I'm not showing you this on a server anymore because I've moved its page or this place, and I want to keep that secret if I can. But here's the basic setup. This conf.php is not in here. I just put that in there to title it. So it starts off with a normal PHP delimiter and ends with a normal PHP delimiter. And hey, look, this looks familiar. It's not Python, it is PHP, but we have a try catch block, so it's a little bit different than the try except block for those of you that have been taking my class in Python in the previous year. So it's try catch. This is a object-oriented approach to interfacing with a database. We're going to set up a new database connection, DBH. And the way we do that is we call new PDO. So PDO is actually going to do this for us. And the way PDO is set up is it helps protect us from those kinds of attacks that I was just talking about earlier, injection attacks. So we're going to pass this a string. We're going to give it the host. Host is going to be localhost. If you had your database on a different server, then you'd have a different IP address in here. The database name for me, as I've been talking about in my video, is a database I set up specifically for my web page. It was CSCI 205 web page, and if you remember the last video, I actually imported the bakery database into there. I'm going to specify the character set, and this is the user that I set up that has only access to that database. Now, I probably shouldn't be broadcasting this on the web, but there's an easy fix. I can go back and just change all this stuff after I'm done making this video. And the truth is, I really don't care if somebody hacks this database. Go ahead. There's nothing lost. And then here you would put your password. Notice that this first string is all one string here, like this, and ends there. That's important. And then this last bit, this array, normally you wouldn't have this, but there's a difference between an error and an exception. An error might be, you typed in a piece of code incorrectly or you used a wrong command. An exception is something happened with that command. So for example, a divide by 0 would be an exception. So we're saying report errors as exceptions. This is used for debugging. I use this quite a bit because I had some errors in my code, and it's going to be pretty hard to track them without having your errors reported as exceptions, because then you can catch the exception, you can get that your connection failed, and you can report out the message. So the syntax here is catch, list the PDO exception, give that a variable type, and then we're going to echo out, and E being exception has a get message method, and then we're going to kill the whole thing. Okay, so this is the format that you want for your configuration. Once you get that and you're connected to the database, then we can do all kinds of things. We can read from the database, we can write to the database, and we've done enough database programming that I think we'll be able to figure that out pretty well. But this is the important part. It took me quite a while to get the syntax exactly right on this, so you have the luxury of being able to just copy this down. Lucky you. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to go back over and look at then my code for the web page. So let's see, it's in one of these. Nope, that's not it. Here we go. So here's the code now for the web page. So you know the include command. This stuff is the basic stuff. I put a head in it at CSI 205 MySQL, and I put in a paragraph, sample output from the bakery database, a line break, and then here I started the PHP code. So I included this file. I took out the include part here. Again, I'm trying not to broadcast too much information about the web page I set up. I'm driving my network administrator nuts enough as it is by broadcasting some of this stuff, so I'm trying to keep it minimal if I can. And then, oops. Okay, we are back. I had lost a connection through PuTTY. I had gone away from my computer a little bit and it dropped the connection, and when I came back I tried to resize the screen as you saw, and when I did it said, oh, your connection's been dropped. So I went back in and reconnected. So here we are. So this include would have the path in it to that conf file that we just went over. And we've talked about that before in previous videos. I don't need to do that again. But remember, now we have that DBH set up as a connection to the server. So now I'm going to want to issue a statement to the server. So I'm going to prepare select star from cookies. So what does prepare do? Well, remember those injection attacks? Prepare is going to help us avoid any kinds of mistakes in our code so that we don't accidentally cause some of those injection attacks. If you don't use prepare and you have to do this yourself manually, it can be quite tricky to do. So this is, I guess, this is the easiest way by far to do it. Then we execute that command. So this actually goes out to the database and executes it. And when we're done, we now want to get the results back. So we issue a fetch. Okay, so now that we issue the fetch, we get a result. And this result is a list. Now, in this case, we just did a fetch. It's going to give us the first row from this database. You can actually do something called a fetch all, which will give you the entire table. I'm sorry, I said first row in the database. I actually meant the first row in this table from the database that we specified, which was that what we used to call the bakery database, but now we're calling it CSCI 205 webpage. Okay, so we do a fetch. This gives us one row. And you have to know some things about the row. So I had this other window up here, which I'm not going to resize this time. So I actually logged into MySQL and did select star from cookies. So this is the cookies database. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. This is the cookies table. This is the one we're selecting from. So this I did in MySQL just to show you what it looks like. Remember, there's an ID for the cookie, then it's cookie name. There's a foreign key for the ingredients, and then there's an amount of the ingredient in the cookie, and then there's a measurement. So looking here, I don't want the ID. That's not really going to tell me anything. So what I want is to print out the cookie and the name, the ingredient ID, Now, if I did a join, I could do something a little nicer than having this ingredient ID, but I didn't do the join. I just wanted to do something very basic. Ingredient ID is the second column. Well, actually, it's the third column, right? They're indexed from 0. And then here, I'll just put this underneath here. The amount of the ingredient, and then the measurement. So I'm going to print that out using PHP, and when I print that out, that is what you get on your web page. So we have successfully interfaced our database with the web page. So where we're going to go from here, now that we have that ability to interface, we can pull information out of a database and put it up on a web page. So we will be looking at more detail how to do that. And then we can also take information from a web page and put it into the database and create entries and tables and create tables and whatnot. So that's where we're going to be headed for now. Really, the focus of this video is twofold: to talk about a little bit about why we're using the PDO, and that's really is security. Why are we using the prepare and execute? Again, security. So I think if you wanted to look through some information on the internet about injection attacks, I think it's fairly clear what's going on there, and it's pretty serious. So this is the simplest and easiest way to avoid all of that. And then, here's a simple fetch statement. This is the kind of thing that we're going to be looking at more detail in future videos. Again, now that we can set up and execute MySQL statements, then how do we use those? How do we interface those with our web pages?